Hi, everybody. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a great delight to be back in Mumbai, the city that never sleeps. And today, congratulations to all the business leaders for making the city tick the way it does. I must also thank the Times Group and ET, in particular, Meenal, for inviting me to be here with all of you. It's really a great pleasure. I wanted to talk about the fact that we live in this era of change and transformation. And these transformations, originally coming from technology, have weaved such a change in our lives. Our economic structures and systems, our social life, the way we interact and communicate with each other, and even in political systems. And these have also, in some ways, brought great benefit to us. It helps us leapfrog the stages of development. And in some ways, many of the poor developing countries can become middle level and then developed countries as well. And we are all beneficiaries of this. A lot of this change came from the West, but we were the beneficiaries. Sometimes we forget that there are similar trends that are happening in our parts of the world. And I was so interested in the comments that Dasho from Bhutan made about the changes that are happening in his society and in his country, and how that can bring about a new concept and understanding. So let us also look at some of these changes that are coming from our part of the world, and I'm so happy that business is really at the core of it. I think in this world of transformation, I shall focus on three specific ones that are happening in our parts of the world, particularly in Asia, but going out as well. We've seen that over the last 50 years or so, the economies in Asia became more and more developed. Of course, Japan had happened before that, but Japan's was a case in which Japan grew almost in isolation at a time when the others were still floundering or trying to find their steps. But I think in the last 50 years, we've seen the tigers grow, we've seen China come up, and of course, we've seen India come up. And this is becoming a more democratic kind of expansion and development. And so the center of economic gravity, the geoeconomics of the world, shifted in a sense from the Atlantic towards Asia. And that is something that puts us right in the focus. We have built up some financial muscle. I think the financial reserves of our countries has grown considerably. The capacity for technological development has also grown. But at the end of the day, we are still largely dependent on the West, though there are some instruments that have come up within ourselves which are fairly robust today. But we interact both within ourselves and with the developed world. I think what we've also seen is that in this process, the kind of status that we have in global governance has not been as marked. And I think that's the kind of process that we now need to undertake. There are some ideas that are coming about. You would have heard of the idea of the Indo-Pacific, which has come, which really puts Asia right in the forefront. And that is kind of the change towards the geostrategic change that Asia seeks to have, and to bring about a greater representation for our kind of countries. The second big change that I wanted to refer to was the emergence of the idea of the Global South. And the Global South is still a very nebulous idea. It's growing and emerging, and it's just like the countries that we are talking about. And these are spread across Asia, Africa, and even Latin America. But they are countries that have experienced this development. They are countries in which their capacities have increased. They are countries in which the societies have advanced and are far more aspirational than before. And they want a place on the seat in global governance, in global affairs. They want to be heard, and they want to be contributing to things as well. So when it comes to their ability to contribute, that has certainly come about. But now there is a greater willingness and a desire to do that. And I think that, in a sense, is what the Global South is about. That's a big shift that is happening, which will bring about bigger shifts in the way we interact with each other and also with the rest of the world, particularly in the developed world. And I think what we're also doing at the same time in the Global South is that we are creating not only new institutions, but also creating new ideas. Many of these ideas are endogenic to ourselves, have evolved from our own history and tradition and civilization, but many of them are also a process of the fusion that we've had in terms of our experience with the West. The third big change that I wanted to highlight was that of China. And I think we are all familiar with the fact that the rise of China over the last 40 years in particular was something that has galvanized the Asian community. The Asian economy has had a big impact in the way the global economic development itself has happened and the kind of position that they have had over global politics and geostrategic affairs. But today, China is shifting. China is changing in the sense that maybe it has peaked, that maybe the kind of market economy that it had is changing and there is much greater political control that is coming about. Maybe its society is aging and its demography is going to work against it. So we are actually seeing a big transformation in China itself. And the reason why I talk about China is because China had generally been, I would say, a much more positive factor than many often tend to believe. And I think there was a lot of opportunity for engagement and benefit with a growing China. But China is now not growing at the pace that it was. And it is not likely to be a similar share of the global GDP or global affairs or trade in the days to come, but it will probably still continue to be a large presence in terms of its political influence. Now, I see this both as an opportunity and a chance that is lost out. An opportunity because I think this, in a sense, gives the opportunity for the other countries in Asia to explore and develop much faster and to create their own energies and synergies. But at the same time, it's also a bit of a loss because if China had been there growing at the kind of pace that it had, it would have given so much more ballast and foundation to what we wish to do in common. And that then brings us to the idea of how do we go about this particular new paradigm. And that, I think, is based on partnerships. And I use the word partnership rather deliberately because in some ways, in the geopolitical world and the world of politics and strategy that we've lived in, alliances were often linked to military alliances. And in that, there was a sense of a dominant power. And I think in today's democratic world, which is becoming much more open for all of us, we need something that is much more equal and egalitarian. And partnerships, in a sense, can also be otherwise. But partnerships, in a sense, give that natural give and take, and that's what we would like to have. So what is it that we can really look for in these partnerships that we are looking at? And how can we use these to shape the new world order? The first one that I think, and I'm so happy that we are in a community of businessmen over here, the first one is to recognize that the globalization that we've achieved over the last several decades is here to stay. And despite the protectionist forces that we see in many countries, particularly in the developed world, because they are losing the edge with the developing, the kind of protectionist walls that are coming up are not going to seriously impact the kind of globalization that we would wish to do. And in today's world, where technology is so dominant and knowledge is such an important factor, supply chains are extremely critical, supply and value chains, and how you link up with other possible partners in different parts, in critical materials and energy, in critical technologies, and how you can bring about a greater degree of efficiency and reliability in those chains that you create for yourselves. And in that, I think there is great opportunity for all of us, particularly again in Asia, to try and take this message forward. It is not just a case of having lower prices, and I think there is an argument for that as well, for market penetration and market share. But I think essentially what it is that when you build a certain network of communities, you then begin to share a certain goodness that then contributes not only to your economic progress and profit line, but also to a certain kind of social good and happiness that Dasha was talking about. The second feature that I think we need partnerships on is where we look at how we use human capital. And for very long, I think we've had too many barriers in terms of migration and mobility. And I think we need to really work on that so that we have much more freer movement of professionals, of young people, of skilled workers. And I think the government of India, for instance, has been working on this at some level. I don't know if you're aware, there is something called the Migration and Mobility Partnership Agreement that the government has entered into with a range of countries, particularly in Europe, and also with Taiwan, Japan, and also with Mauritius and some others. And what this essentially does is, because the WTO movement is somewhat stalled and Mode 4 movements are still very restrictive, we have worked out this mechanism in which we do better than what the country offers at the moment for India. And I think many others across Asia can do that, because we have a wealth of people who are so highly qualified or highly skilled. And given the demographics that is happening in many other parts of the world and the kind of technological developments that require higher skills every day, this could be a mutually beneficial process. So the kind of advantages that we get is that we get better access for professionals, we get longer tenures for students who come there. We look at new era jobs. You know, the new industry is creating a new set of jobs. Who would have thought that radio jockeys or chefs in specialty Michelin restaurants or people like content creators would be required from India to go across to the UK. But we do have a certain number that's going to the UK, for example. And it's with other countries as well. At the same time, as you are aware, the kind of mobility that is required for our semi-skilled and skilled workers is also something that we need to work with the Gulf, where we have such a very large population of Indians. And I think this applies to many other countries across Asia, from many of our neighboring countries as well. And what we've tried to do is to try and do a skill mapping and also to try and then have those specific skills brought into the workers, so that when they go across to the Gulf region or to other parts of the world, because now we are having such processes and workers going to Portugal and Italy and Japan as well, that they will not only have a better qualified job and a specific job that they go into, but there's security and better pay for their efforts at the same time. So those are some of the mobility practices that we need to get into, and I think that would be a partnership that would be worthwhile. We've done this at a governmental level, but I think industry can pitch in and contribute much beyond what it is already doing. The third kind of partnership is really in the knowledge sector. And that is where, even Piketty says that knowledge is the one where the value addition and the returns are disproportionately higher than in any other sector. And I think that's where we really need to work together. We noticed that in the earlier session on energy, this was one of the things that was also highlighted on how we collaborate on research. And this is something that really needs to go and become a much broader ambit within ourselves, which includes not just a government-initiated process, but something that is happening at a very industry level as well. So for instance, today, we worked on certain innovation bridges, as we call it, with Israel and Switzerland and Japan. And what this does is it brings people together into joint projects. It also helps people set up startups. Because one of the biggest things that the startups face is how to enter the market, how to scale up, and how to have cross-border transactions. And when you have these collaborations with other countries, you really learn from the best practices over there. And I think there is a great opportunity for us over there. The last one that I wanted to talk about was really about stability. Everybody will need stability if you want progress and prosperity. And for that, of course, we leave the business of doing wars to the government. I don't think the corporate sector needs to get into that. But the corporate sector can actually work with various stakeholders in trying to promote peace and stability and in understanding what are these black swans that might come up, or what are these gray rhinos that we are not really looking at very carefully? Because if we do have a better appreciation of these unanticipated or things that are so visible in front of us, but which actually have huge business impact, then I think we would be able to deal with our business situations much better. We'd also be able to provide the data and information to our partners in different countries that we work with so that they would have similar positive sentiment and environment to run their businesses as well. So I think for me, the key words for today were really about looking at transformation, managing the change, and the second was to build partnerships. So I think the time is now. We really need to put up even more effort into what you all are doing. Congratulations for really having had a really wonderful afternoon, I'm told, of various sessions of contributing to the thought as well as celebrating. I don't want to stay between you and the award ceremony that's about to come, and I also don't want to wish to stand between you and dinner. So make money, make profit, have a great time, partnerships. Thank you.